you so. The sleeping giant is an abomination. I just woke up too, guys. I couldn't go to sleep. I had dreams about this, and I woke up, and this is where we at. Sleeping giant, those in the spotlight, support abominations. Now, Scripture tells us the abomination is something that does not line up with God. It is the opposite. And that's what we are seeing right now. So you have the 4-6 proclaim that this Sunday, as again, I'm going to skip the name, of visibility. Now you guys know that this is supposed to be
broadcast for you here. This explains a little bit why we are seeing the things that we are seeing. The Polish Prime Minister, his name is Donald Tusk. He explained exactly what is happening in very layman terms. Now we all understand why they're saying the things that they are, especially on Fox News, especially on CNN, why the politicians are parroting or mirroring the things that they are saying. This is a quote directly from him. Now you remember that sometimes government officials say the things that they aren't supposed to say. And this happens because in the backroom deals and when the hot mics are off, they all speak in a totally different way than what they are allowed to tell us on television or even on radio. Sometimes the things slip through, and that's the little bit of the truth that we get to see. At the last European Council, he says, I had an interesting discussion with the Spanish Prime Minister. He asked us to stop using the word war in all statements. He argued that people do not want to be threatened in this way, that in Spain it sounds abstract. I replied that for my part of Europe, war is no longer an abstraction, and that our duty is not to discuss, but to act and prepare to defend ourselves. Now that Spanish Prime Minister, that came down from a very high level, and in fact the United Nations and other government bodies that work together have instructed government leaders not to use the word war. They don't want anything to be seen of what's going on as the potential to have a greater global conflict. They want you kept in the dark until the very day that the elites and those with money run into their bunkers and the rest of us get rained down with nuclear fallout. Now, before we get into some other information, we have experts warning that hundreds of millions of people, not hundreds or millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world would lose their lives within the first 72 hours of a nuclear war. One expert who wrote a book on the tactics and technology of current nuclear warfare understandings is warning that in the event of a launch being detected, the future of mankind will be determined in just a few moments. An expert, as he is, has issued a stark warning about this threat. He says no matter how it starts, it ends with a lot of death. Annie Jacobson, she authored several best-selling books on America's military, including the secrets of top-studied research labs like DARPA, the infamous Area 51. They say that in the event of a Russian or Chinese missile being detected, the U.S. president would have just a few moments to make that critical decision. They told podcasters and other news outlets that the current U.S. doctrine stands on a launch on warning. That means that retaliation would take place before there was time to ask questions about why the initial alert was triggered. We are one misunderstanding, she says, one miscalculation away from nuclear Armageddon, and no matter how nuclear war starts, it ends with a lot of death. The U.S. Department of Defense has an early warning system, the ESPERS. The system is called ESPERS as a constellation of satellites is keeping an eye on all American enemies. At the moment of an ICBM launch, they see hot rocket exhaust on the ICBM a fraction of a second after it launches. There begins the horrifying policy, they say, called launch on warning, and that's the U.S. counterattack. The reason the USA is ferociously watching for nuclear launches on the ground around the globe is so that nuclear command and control in the U.S. can move into action immediately. The policy, launch on warning, is exactly like it says. It means the USA will not wait to absorb that attack. It will launch all retaliatory weapons immediately. The effects of the explosion would still not be understood. They really don't know what'll happen. That's why Jeff Bezos hustling his little butt into his bunker, Zuckerberg running his A into the bunker, Rogan hopping into that mobile whip and hitting his command bunker on the road, Taylor Swift. You have all of these leaders, all of these politicians, all of these government bodies. They know where to go and what to do. Don't forget, if you plan for a disaster as an American, you're a conspiracy theorist. Don't want to do that. That's fear talking. Don't be so doom and gloomy. They're out here buying armies and building years worth of food supplies. But if you do it, you're the bad guy. So NATO allies are being warned that a war with Russia is coming very soon. This is another quote. This is the Estonian ambassador. I would dare to say that it is only now, in the midst of this great war. Now pay attention to the shifting in language, the change in language. It used to be that they said things like conflict. Now, as we just saw from the Polish Prime Minister, the warnings from the UN, the warnings from the Spanish Prime Minister, they are all now saying war. He says that it is only now, in the midst of this great war, that it has dawned on all NATO leaders and senior military leaders that all this may actually be needed very soon. There is a real threat, a real military task. We must behave in such a way that with this machinery, when it is needed, is ready. Now he's speaking as an envoy to NATO. He's telling Estonian outlets that it seems to me that this final realization has only come after the aggression began. They are saying that, quote, the question is, could NATO be challenged here? We are more technologically advanced, he warns. Now, this is Lithuania's foreign minister. This is Gabrielas Landsbergis saying that NATO is more technologically advanced. We are better prepared. We're better trained, among all other things. But Russia is fighting an actual war. Again, they use the term war. They're building up their army, and they are expecting to be politically not prepared in the West. Not militarily unprepared, but politically, and that's exactly what we're looking at. The American people, the Western people, they don't know what's really going on. The politics don't know. They're looking at other things, looking at why they just turned Easter Sunday into a very different kind of visibility day in the USA. So if you want to talk about him rising again, you don't really know if it's a he rising, right? Because that's the new administration. Now remember, the Polish Prime Minister said at the last European Council, I had an interesting discussion. He asked us to stop using the word war, but they will not. The Estonian ambassador said that NATO needs to escalate this. Listen to this quote. If you are the side that says all the time you don't want to escalate or irritate the other, I didn't give a weapon to Ukraine, he continues, then you are setting yourself up for failure. You lose the initiative. So in that sense, we as NATO need to escalate.
In 14 days, the National Guard will be deployed for an event that is coming to America. The question is this needed? Or is this an overreach or an overreaction to the solar eclipse? The story's out of Zero Hedge, and I think it's important to go over because, as it says right here, the National Guard is only supposed to be deployed in emergencies.
A black swan event we were warned about. We're going to look at the latest surrounding the collapse and the concerns that this may indeed have been orchestrated. And then
we need to be clear-eyed about the implications of it. Difficult times make for difficult decisions. We are contending with something we've never had to contend with before.
Rachel Maddow and the ultra-leftists over at MSNBC are going through a total and complete meltdown. You're going to absolutely love the reason why. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your patron professor, here to help you stay sane during these insane times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. And let's dive right in. Shocking images coming from the city of Baltimore this morning. A 950-foot cargo ship from Singapore left Baltimore's Seagirt Marine Terminal at approximately 12:30 a.m. on Tuesday morning. About an hour later, around 1:25 a.m., the ship began to slow and divert away from its course. As you can see, the video indicates some kind of power outage with the lights going off on board. Then they turn back on, only to go off again. All the smoke can be seen coming out from the top of the ship. And then, of course, it rammed into the bridge, causing it to catastrophically collapse. As of the making of this video, there were reports of 2 people being rescued alive, but as many as possibly 20 remain unaccounted for. Now, obviously, this is radically devastating for the city of Baltimore. I lived in Baltimore for nearly 10 years. I went to school there. I met my wife there. My eldest child was born there. Baltimore is very near and dear to my heart, and this bridge collapse is absolutely devastating to the city. It's rightly being called a catastrophic event, particularly for the commuter-based infrastructure connecting the city to the wider Baltimore County. The governor of Maryland, of course, has declared a state of emergency. But the bizarre behavior of the cargo ship prior to running into the bridge has many asking this morning, was this incident in Baltimore an actual deliberate black swan event? A black swan event is an unexpected, in many ways, an unimaginable incident that suddenly occurs, and here's the key, the event has a significant or even devastating impact on society. Now, the reason why this is coming up is because people like General Mike Flynn have been out there warning about the inevitability and imminence of a black swan event for weeks now.
But mark my words, these are everything that you just talked about, and the things that I'm going to talk about here in this movie shortly, these are all knowable things. Okay, these are things that we know. These are the things that we can imagine. What these people are going to try to come up with, Benny, and this is for your audience and for your ability to influence, they're going to try to come up with things that are unknowable. And and in the world of military operations, or even in the world of just things, they call them black swan events, right? Black swan events are things that nobody imagined could occur, and yet they did, right? And then they have these incredibly, mostly devastating effects. So I think that's what we have got to be thinking about. And I think as we talk to our audiences and we look for feedback from different people, all of these things, and then we have to be prepared on our side. We have to be prepared to immediately respond to these scenarios, right? Like, I think a scenario is these people just decide, look, there's no way in the world that they can win a legitimate, fair election, so let's not have one. So in order to not have one, how do they create the conditions in order to not have an election? Now, that's a scenario. It's not a scenario that I want to have as an outcome, but that is a scenario that I can imagine.
So there you have it. Biden cannot win this election legitimately. His polls are in absolute free fall. We'll talk about that in our second video today. His polls are falling apart despite the best hopes of the legacy media. He can't win. And so according to this theory, they need to orchestrate a black swan event, either to alter the election results or even possibly cancel the election.